New Zealand is a country that has a lot of problems. We're talking about a country with a population of around 5 million people who hold a geography roughly the size of Great Britain. Welcome back to Susology. You're here with Gunnar, of course, with Suze. Doesn't pass the pub test. My thoughts, New Zealand should already be part of the Australian Federation.
Well, why not? I mean, Canada's in line for it, and a couple of provinces have already applied.
Let's start with this idea. Already, as we talk, 670,000 New Zealanders are living in Australia. Put that into your mind, that's about 15% of the New Zealand population is permanently living in Australia.
They know when they're onto a good thing.
Well, what I understand is if you want to catch a New Zealander, a good place to do that is Brisbane, where they have really the large expat population, or just go loitering at any supermarket aisle where they sell the New Zealand produce, or outside a fish and chip shop, and you can hear them when they order the fish and chips.
Well, you know the reason why they like coming here so much?
Tell me.
We have the largest amount of sheep.
Well, it's like that standing joke, why is the grass so green in New Zealand? And it's because they're all over here, standing on our grass. New Zealand, I've just come back from there a couple of weeks ago. It is a beautiful place. I think it was my 9th visit there. As soon as I turned up at customs, I was welcomed very, very cordially and very well by a chap at the customs booth who said, well, welcome to the main island. And that's kind of cute. That's that rivalry, that understanding between us ANZACs, the Australians and the New Zealanders. We're blood brothers. We're twins which were still joined at the hip, just separated basically
by a ditch.
By the ditch. Yeah. But we can share that same sort of humour. New Zealand is a country that has a lot of problems. We're talking about a country with a population of around 5 million people who hold a geography roughly the size of Great Britain. And really in a territory, when you think about it, about 80% of that country is uninhabited. Now, one of the major reasons for that is the Alps, the mountains, etc. that you'll see there. If you've seen the Lord of the Rings movies, you'll realise just how dramatically captivating and beautiful the geography of New Zealand is. And I suggest to you, the people are just as captivating and as wonderful as well. And if you've ever had a Maori friend, you've never had a friend like that friend. I'm talking from experience. Problems that they've got, if you've got a population of 5 million people with a net drain in terms of migration per year, you've got a lot of problems, because when the best people are leaving your country, invariably it's Australia, Seuss, that they're coming to. And we're not getting you worse. It's not like Trump when he's talking about what's happening with the immigration from Mexico. He says, let me tell you, they're not sending us their best. Let me tell you, with New Zealand, they are. Thank you. You are sending us your best. You're sending us your most talented, your youngest, basically your most enterprising people to Australia, and building Australia up as a result. And that's one of the reasons why I think a federation between Australia and New Zealand would make so much sense. Now, I'm lucky. I remember sitting down having a glass of wine with the former Governor-General of Australia and discussing the Constitution. Now, don't turn off, this is not boring. The Australian Constitution actually mentions New Zealand in it. As a possible state for the Federation. And then it goes on to talk about, well, whichever states have formed part of this Federation, this is what's to happen. So when the Constitution was written, West Australia, it was thought, was probably not going to join. But at the very last minute they did join, but New Zealand decided at the very last minute not to. Why? The reason for it was, and remember this is going back when these states were still very, very young, had a very strong relationship still and identity with Britain.
Oh, that's right.
And didn't want to basically interrupt that or to join a larger federation such as Australia. Now, Australia is interesting. We've got, about 26 million people? About, 6 times the number of people that are living in New Zealand. So if New Zealand was to join Australia, they would join as a state of the Federation. They wouldn't be recognised as a separate nation.
No.
It would be part of the Federation of States. That's what Australia is. But there would still be 2 Australian states that are larger than New Zealand. I'm talking, of course, about New South Wales, secondly Victoria. Only the third largest state would be New Zealand. You see, New Zealand's interesting. They don't have a constitution at all.
I never knew that.
But they would have to come in, and there's already allowance in our constitution for them to join, but there would be a matter of referendums. Our constitution says that we can't just invite someone, they have to willingly join. So let's say that there were referendums on both sides, and it was decided that New Zealand became the third largest state, I should say, of Australia. What would it mean? Well, Australia's GDP is dramatically bigger than New Zealand's, not only because of the fact we've got 6 times as many people, we're just more productive, we're just more wealthy.
Yeah, well, we've got all the natural resources that New Zealand doesn't have.
That's exactly right, although you could argue that New Zealand does have a lot of resources in the sea as well, and maybe they're not exploiting them as well as they possibly could. So if they were to come across, they would join in the bonanza of Australia's GDP. Thinking about it from another point of view, though, let's look at defence. New Zealand, I said their geography is the size of Great Britain, basically. They're surrounded by sea. They've got a defence force of 9,000 people. Now, when Sergeant Jono takes a day off because he's got a cold, it actually is a severe detriment to the New Zealand Defence Force. Half of that is the army, so their army is only 4,500 people. It's pretty small. I mean, in terms of their artillery, they've got no automated guns. Everything that they tow around is still towed around. And I'm talking here to Susa, I'm gunner, so this is important. We're talking about artillery. They're still using the 105 pop guns, and they're still towing that sort of stuff. Australia ditched those a long time ago. We still have them for some ceremonial practice if you graduate. From a course, they might have a 105 there to salute you.
Well, they have a few parked out in front of RSLs, you know, for... I've lost my track here.
No, you're right. So ceremonial purposes, really, for Australia. But that's what New Zealand's relying on. HIMARS, things like that, forget it. Submarines, forget it. It's got to the point where decades ago, New Zealand Air Force abandoned their fighters. You heard me correctly. New Zealand has no fighters and has no bombers. It effectively doesn't have, really, a defence force. In their strategy, they do not even count themselves as wanting of dreaming to have a defence force that could launch a force against a peer. No. What they're looking at doing is projecting force only to some of the regional areas in the Pacific. We're talking about very small nation states, you know, things like Tonga. that sort of thing. I was lucky enough a few weeks ago to take a ferry past the naval base. Now, New Zealand really has one naval base, that's Devonport, just outside of Auckland. And basically, in that 30-second whirlwind tour, I saw the complete navy of New Zealand, which represents 2 ANZAC frigates, one of them out of work at the moment for repairs, and the other one still sort of doing the high seas. Now,
you didn't just let one of their national security things out, you know, letting people around the world know where they're...
It's all well and known. It's on Wikipedia.
Oh, okay. Oh, well, there you go then.
I've verified it with my own eyes. Initially, they were to have 4 ANZAC frigates. At the last minute, they bailed, only had 2. Well, you've got 1 in commission at the moment. These are the sort of things that Australia's replacing, those frigates. The frigates we're looking at replacing our navy with will be about twice the size, so big that you could almost count them as destroyers. But New Zealand's still looking at what they're doing. They are looking at changing what's happening with their defence. They're looking at increasing from a measly 1% of small GDP to 2%. But that's a meaningful development in their defence force.
Well, for their size of their GDP, that's a big increase.
Yeah, and that's a reason why I think why a federation with Australia would make a lot of sense. So remember the Australian Constitution, it basically outlines the specific powers that will be adopted by the Federation, and all of the others will be retained by the states. Defence is obviously one of those. It's a defence, I think, that we really need. We do have the ANZUS arrangement.
That's right.
Really, the shit has been kicked out of that when New Zealand refused nuclear-capable ships from America to docking
in their ports.
So it's a bit of a fragile treaty on their side. Now, we always look at the pact they have with Australia as being like the ancient Greek amphoras, the big pots, the Greek pottery with the big handles on either side, and each country will hold one side of the defence. You haven't been doing it, so think about that federation. What it would mean if there was a federation is that Australia would have to look at a really important founding document of New Zealand. Now, Australia was taken by conquest, and the legal understanding, what was basically taken as our logos, our reason, was that this was a terra nullius. This land had no prior sovereign people to the land at all. People who didn't form their own government, have their own law, have any rights to the land, and so it was occupied. It was conquered. New Zealand was very different. Now, the All Blacks are probably the most fearsome rugby team in the history of the game.
You just got to love how they prepare for a game.
Yes.
Yeah, you're awestruck by their demonstration just before a game.
Their physicality, wouldn't you say?
Yes.
These are warrior people. You know the film Once Were Warriors? These guys are warrior people. Now, the weapons that they had were said by the British forces to be the most lethal handheld weapons that they'd ever come across. And these fighters, they're nothing to be sneezed at. So New Zealand wasn't as easy to conquer. It wasn't as easy because there wasn't the same number of people coming across to conquer from Britain. Yeah. And secondly, if you want to conquer another force, you bring the Celts to do the job.
Yeah.
That's how the American Indians were arrested from their land, and how the Australian Aboriginals were arrested from Australia as well. You bring a lot of Celts across and they'll do the job.
Yeah.
That's what England found. They didn't bring enough across. What that meant is that it wasn't seized by conquest. In fact, there was a treaty that was done. It was called the Treaty of Waitangi.
Yep.
It was signed at Waitangi. There was a lot of political hurrah about it. I have been to Waitangi. I've been to the room where the document was signed, so I can feel it in my bones, the history behind that. But politically, it became a little bit of a farce. You had not just the chiefs wanting to sign, you had anybody want to take that pen in their hands, because no matter how unimportant they were from the Maori camp, if they got to sign it, they were seen as being important. Because, hey, I signed the Treaty of Waitangi. But what it means is this. It means that there is recognition of co-power and co-ownership, and recognition of the historical rights of the Maori people to their land. Very different to Australia. Now, in retrospect, we're scrubbing at the moment in Australia. We've had the loss of the referendum for the vote.
Yes, the voice.
You know, the voice.
The voice,
for the Aboriginals in Parliament.
Although the states are trying to subvert that vote.
Yeah, so State of Victoria, in today's Age newspaper, they're talking about the State of Victoria having spent $380-something million already on trying to force through a treaty that was refused federally through referendum. You talk about the voice. If a referendum is not the voice of the people, I really wonder what the voice of the people could possibly be. Bit of an issue with that. But what it means is that the Māori people do have some reserved seats in Parliament. So let's say we had an Australian Parliament and it included New Zealand. Well, at the moment, New Zealand's Parliament's very simple. They don't have separate states, so they don't have state parliaments like we do, one for Victoria, one for New South Wales, etc.
Yep.
And then a federal one in Canberra. They have one in Wellington, which they call the Beehive. If you've ever had a jar of beer at the backbench pub near that, it's fantastic. You can watch the world go by, and you've got all the political caricatures there. You can see I've done the research for this. Anyone watching from New Zealand. But there wouldn't necessarily be the guarantee of seats for people there, but we would have to actually recognise the Treaty of Waitangi in Australian legislation if New Zealand was going to be part of our federation. It's such a crucial founding part of the history and the psyche and the recognition of the Indigenous people of New Zealand.
I personally think they did it right and we cocked it up.
Yeah, I think in retrospect you're right.
Yeah,
I think you're right.
I believe so. And if we would have gone down that track in the first place,
there would have been a lot more harmony.
There would have been. We wouldn't have needed to spend the gross amounts of money that we're spending now on trying to, well, for all intents and purposes, trying to bring about what New Zealand brought about in the first place.
Yeah, and I mean the soul searching, the hand wringing, all that sort of stuff, it would have already been done.
Yep.
at the right time, which is basically the start when you're founding
Yep.
a nation. So let's say that we decided that New Zealand was going to be part of Australia. Our passports would change. Our passports would change because, according to the Treaty of Waitangi, they also should have the expression and use of the language. Now, having been just recently to Auckland, so much of the signage is in Māori as well as in English, and generally they'll have the signage first in Māori. Here's where I have a small issue. The number of native speakers of that language in New Zealand is down to 1.5%. 1.5%. Don't forget that 15% of you guys are living in Australia, and you've only got 1.5% of Māori speakers in New Zealand. So I think for me to go to a train station and have to learn it, that Brismart has also got a different Māori name as well, it doesn't make a lot of sense. It's sort of like the fight of the Celtic people in Scotland to try and have Gaelic recognised there as well as English. I mean, what would happen if these Indigenous languages were to go? It would be a bit of a pity. Like that comedy sketch, yes, it would be a bit of a pity, but really,
It's like
not much else.
It's like, oh dear, how sad. Never mind.
If you're a New Zealander and you want to come and work in Australia, no sweat. Come. You're sending us your best and your brightest. Keep doing it. You're doing us a great favour.
I don't think they're sending them. I think they're coming voluntarily.
They are coming voluntarily. I've read some interesting articles recently of people, young people, who've just attended one party after the other just after COVID finished and Australia and New Zealand reopened up, and the people farewelling their young friends and then finally deciding, well, for me it's either I move to Auckland or I move to London or I move to Melbourne, Brisbane or Sydney. That's really it. And by and large, 50% of them come across to the eastern seaboard of Australia. Quite a few go to London, and the pilgrimage used to always be for New Zealanders, this is going back about 40 years, to go to London. That was like a rite of passage that always did that, and they'd always come back. But the problem is now this. You Kiwis, you brightest Kiwis, are leaving, but you are not coming back. So I remember a couple of New Zealand elections ago watching the election, and the Prime Minister said, it is now time for you to come back. It's time for you to come back and rebuild the country. It didn't happen, and it won't happen. But you see, if there was a federation between Australia and New Zealand, essentially the brain resources and your youth and your blood and your energy is still contained economically within that group.
Yep.
We look at the way that Australian states support each other. We don't really support each other. What we do is people pay a consumption tax and we rip all the money off West Australia and we send it to the states that can't afford to look after themselves. I'm talking about a sort of thing like that. I just want to finish by saying this. I think regarding the Treaty of Waitangi, it's something that Australia is still trying to correct, and I think the chances of us correcting it are getting less and less.
Yes, they are.
Because what we're doing is, we're now dealing with people who are fifth generation Australian of European descent, and probably second generation of Asian descent. We're importing a truckload of people from the subcontinent who really have got no truck in this, and really are not affected.
They got no
by
skin in the game whatsoever.
Whatsoever at all. But I think that the progression towards our recognition of native title in Australia is really through the courts, particularly with what we saw with Mabo. So, going back to my conjecture at the start, for defence purposes, I think that New Zealand should be part of Australia. For economic purposes and for opportunities, it should be part of Australia. For recognition of identity, I think that we're robust enough to understand each other in this multicultural world. I think that New Zealand inevitably will become part of the federation of these great states.
So that's the question. Do you think New Zealand becoming part of Australia as an independent state of Australia, do you think that passes the pup test? Now, my opinion is, I believe it does. I believe that passes the pup test.
Look, we're already ANZACs. To be treated as anything else is ridiculous. I went up and bought myself a gallery ticket. They had a line for New Zealanders and one for international. I simply rocked up with a New Zealand accent and I got New Zealand prices because I was renting a property on Anzac Street, and I am an Anzac. We're brothers in arms. And that's choice.
Choice, mate. Hey, does that mean that our that the next passport is going to have a Kiwi on it?
What a beautiful thing. What a beautiful thing.
Hey?
If you like what you see, support us. Jump on board, and we'll see you in the next one.
Give us a like and a subscribe, and don't forget to give us a comment down below, guys. Catch you on the next one.